Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, man.
And joining us now is illustrious guest, Michael Brooks Show original crew member,
Yes, sir.
my favorite podcaster, Wosny Lambre. Woz, how's it going?
What up, Matt? My brother, David, what's going on? I'm good, man. I'm happy to be back on with you, brothers.
Woz is, like I said, there's probably about 45 minutes of more prep that I could do on Wednesdays if Woz's group chat didn't come out right during show prep hours. I'm a big fan. Also, Woz, I know you're not convinced that North Dakota is a real place yet, but
Yeah,
I will say, when I was home for the holidays, we're talking about the Ringer. And I told my brother that I knew you personally, and he's like, "Oh my God, you know Big Woz?" And it's like, you're hitting your marks in North Dakota.
So it's so cool, and this has been happening basically since I started messing with the athletic too. Like you become a little bit more known for what you do in your work and your field and all of that. But I will say, like, going to the Ringer and being a guest on Bill's show, which is like obviously the biggest shit I've ever done. Like, it's not even close. The other day, somebody who's a friend of mine, Sabrina Merchant from SB Nation, we were at the Lakers game together and we took a selfie and she posted it on her Instagram. And she was like, 3 of my Duke bros. She's a Duke University alumnus. She said 3 of my Duke pros text me like, "Oh my God, you know Big Woz." I was like, that is hilarious, amazing, life affirming, all of that stuff. It's just like, wow, like that's so crazy. Because I tell people this all the time. When you do what we do, i.e. content creation or whatever, like it can very oftentimes feel like you're just speaking into the void. Like, is anybody listening to this? And if they are they actually like receiving it? Is this penetrate? Oh, is there a point to any of this? So it's always cool to get some type of feedback for the work that you do. You know what I mean? So yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Shouts to your brother.
Yeah, he's a big fan. And I also was telling Woz before we got on air that I had a airport emergency, and I used him shitting all over the Sixers with Bill Simmons to calm myself down, and everything was fine.
In a corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Just seething in the corner, just listen to Woz calming down.
I didn't read I'll just sidebar for a little bit. I didn't realize that I needed a COVID test I didn't need a COVID test to get into Spain, but I needed one to get out of Spain. And I just neglected to like inform myself about that. So I'm sitting there in the line with like ticking down the time to my flight, waiting for a COVID test. I'm like, well, I could just sit here being very anxious, or I could just listen to a podcast. And if I miss my flight, I miss my flight. And luckily I made my flight. But anyways, let's get back to basketball here. Before we talk about the playoffs a little bit, Woz, there's this concept called the player empowerment era. And I've heard other people say that this is maybe even leaching into other sports like football or baseball. I'm less of an expert on that, but I am, of course, familiar with, say, the big 3 Miami Heat, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. But what is the player empowerment era for sort of a more casual sports fan? And do you think that's an accurate name for it?
So, yeah, I think you're smart to pinpoint the Miami Heat Big 3 era, the Heatles era, whatever you want to call it, back when it was LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. LeBron and Bosh actually being the ones who actually joined the team via free agency. I think the average fan, when they hear that term, is tied to the concept that players now dictate where they play, i.e. work. Right? Players have more of a say, specifically the most important players, the star players, who disproportionately affect what happened. Both they disproportionately affect what happens on the court, and they disproportionately drive ratings, which the TV deal is the biggest revenue driver in the entire, revenue pie. Right. So they're the most important people in driving revenue, and they're the most important people as far as the outcomes of these games that we love to watch. And fans and, people who generally watch basketball, think of the player empowerment era. of being embodied in LeBron and the decision. His decision to join the Miami Heat in the summer of 2010, and his decision to televise this announcement of this free agency, right? And the idea being that this guy at 25 years old had the presence of mind 3 years prior to 2010 summer to, instead of signing a 5-year deal, which was the custom after your rookie deal, the custom was lock in as much money as you possibly can as soon as you can at every single turn, right? In NBA, it's pro sports, period. They give you a huge amount of money, lock it in. LeBron had the presence of mind in 2007 to not sign a 5-year extension, but to sign a 3-year one because he wanted to speed up the process by which he could be an unrestricted free agent. Because, and we're going to get into the weeds here a little bit, but because the way the collective bargaining agreement is structured in basketball is that after your rookie contract, which those contracts are scaled depending on where you're drafted, where you're taken in the draft. People at the top of the draft, first, second, third pick, make higher rookie scale deals than people at the end of the draft, say 20s, into the 30s. And of course, people in the first round, their money is fully guaranteed. The people in the second round are on non-guaranteed deals, right? That's sort of an overview. So you have the rookie scale. It's 4 years you play on a rookie scale deal. Then after your rookie scale deal is up, we have what's called restricted free agency, meaning you can go out and court offers from other teams. However, your team has the right of first refusal, meaning they have the right to match that offer, meaning you don't really, even after your rookie scale deal, have the choice to go pick whoever you want. You can go out and get a great offer. And if your team still wants you, they get to match it. However, they still have the ultimate right of your destiny and your future in the immediacy of that deal because they can match it. What's always been the custom for most NBA players, all NBA players, as a matter of fact, before LeBron James, was if a team offered you the maximum years and the maximum dollar amount, you took that deal because the idea was always that you need to lock in this money as soon as you can. Where LeBron and his agents revolutionized these rookie these rookie deals, these rookie extensions, or these what are called second contracts, the real money contracts. He said, instead of taking the 5 years and the maximum allowable amount to be paid, I just want 3 years. And in 3 years, I'll be able to pick wherever the hell I want. Okay, so he chose freedom over the guarantee of money because by that time he could do this. And again, God bless LeBron and the people around him. He could do this. He could say, look, I've already locked in. Before I even dribbled the basketball in the NBA court, I had already locked in $100 million with Nike. My rookie scale deal probably paid me another 16, 20, whatever the hell it was at the time. I can't remember. Plus this deal was going to be for 3 years and about $54 million or something like that. I'm pretty golden. Even with this, I could probably take out an insurance plan. If I get a horrific injury, I'm pretty covered on the back end. Okay, them 2 extra years are not going to mean anything to me. I'm going to become a restricted free agent at 25. And again, this was unprecedented in the history of the NBA that somebody left the money on the table, 1. And 2, a guy became unrestricted free agent at the peak of his physical gifts at 25 years old. And basically put the entire sport on notice, gave them 3 years in advance to know I'm open for business in the summer of 2010. You all know it. This isn't my restricted free agency where everybody knows Cleveland, before I even go out and try to get the biggest deal possible, they're just going to guarantee it for me. And like, it's not the same as that. This is me. LeBron James and my people have the right to pick whoever I want to play with. And this is the first time that ever happened in the history of the game. And I know I'm super long-winded here, But that's when people started calling it player empowerment, because it was players realizing, and also this is another thing that people need to realize. When LeBron did that, he literally shifted the NBA. Teams started financially planning to have money on their books from the moment he signed that 3-year extension until 2010. They spent 3 years angling. The Knicks, the Heat, the Clippers, you name it, the Bulls spent 3 years angling to make sure that they had the money on their books to get this guy. So that's what they mean by empowerment. This guy controlled his own destiny, and he empowers what? Your ability to influence the behaviors of others. And that's exactly what LeBron did by doing that. And then the other component of why people kept calling it player empowerment is it's coupled with a sort of quasi-athlete activism. I think at the time it felt like such a shock to the system because we were coming out of the Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan era of apoliticism in professional sports, specifically here in America. And so when LeBron is doing shit like putting Trayvon Martin on his sneakers, they taking pics for their Instagram with hoodies on, and they're speaking out on police violence and all of that kind of stuff in the black community. They're like, people are seeing them both controlling their destiny where they want to work on the court, coupled with a new wave of athlete activism. So people coin that term. Wow, these guys are more empowered in their voices and in their professional autonomy than we've ever seen before. And so they coined the phrase player empowerment. But I know I've just been going on and on and on.
Keep going.
But before we even get to LeBron James, the person that we have to think about before all of this is actually Kevin Garnett. And Kevin Garnett, I want to say, he signed his first non-rookie deal. He gets drafted in 1995. I think he signed his first non-rookie deal in his first extension in 1998. And in that deal, Kevin Garnett signed a 6-year, $126 million, which immediately became the craziest deal in the history of the NBA. And it immediately sent shockwaves like, whoa, this young kid who's only 3 years out of high school has already signed the biggest deal in the history of the NBA. And the owners were just like, hold up, wait a minute. This is unprecedented. This is a bad precedent if you're the owners, right? This can't happen. Of course, luck would have it, there's a collective bargaining, there's a contract negotiation, collective bargaining agreement coming only a year after. Okay, and so what ends up happening is, and it wasn't just KG that signed a crazy deal. It was Juwan Howard. It was all of these things. And mind you, I talked to you about LeBron's rookie wage scale. That didn't exist in the years of Kevin Garnett signing that big deal in Minnesota. The back in the days, guys like Chris Webber, a bunch of people, rookies would hold out sometimes. I think Jim Jackson was a rookie holdout. People would hold out to try to get as much money as they could from their respective team that drafted them. And so what the owners did, they was like, oh, fuck this. They put in two things in complete opposition and reaction to the Kevin Garnett deal. They put in the rookie wage scale and they put in the maximum salary, right? What's the maximum salary? KG signed a deal. There was no cap on how much an NBA player could make. He just signed a fair market deal, essentially. It was just like, if I, at 20 years old, already a two-time All-Star, I believe at the time, revolutionizing my position as an NBA big, being a guy who handles, shoots, runs the floor, but like does everything, revolutionizing my position. If I hit the open market, I'd probably get more than this shit from a team like the New York Knicks, from the Los Angeles Lakers. This is a market-defining deal that I just signed. They say, you know what? What we're going to do is we're going to put a maximum salary cap. A maximum salary on players, thereby artificially deflating the amount that an NBA player can make, right? And so Out of that, they do the lockout in the night right before the 98-99 season. They lock the players out. They get all of these concessions. But I think the revenue split still remained 57-43 in favor of the players at the time. And this is what they do. Owners, of course, always being reactionary is their nature. They're loving it. But guess what happens with the max contract? That there was one problem with the max contract that the owners couldn't have perceived. The deals were, the max you could sign for was for 7 years, and owners were giving these 7-year deals all over the place to guys like Chris Webber, to guys like Jermaine O'Neal, to guys who at the time maybe they might have signed it, and it might have been worth it to sign it to them, especially to a market like Sacramento, et cetera, et cetera. But Chris Webber became the poster child of what was wrong with the paradigm of the max deal, because very shortly into signing that max deal for 7 years, his knee gave out on him, maybe in year 2 of that deal, and that contract became an albatross. And so what they did in the next collective bargaining agreement, because the owners can't help themselves, again, KG just gets a deal he negotiates with his employer, and the owners say, fuck that, we can't help ourselves. We're going to end up giving all kinds of people all kinds of stupid deals. We have to artificially stop ourselves from doing this. Let's put the max salary in. Then when Chris Webber and them, Allen Houston, you name it, they signed these 7-year max deals. Those deals start quickly turning sour, and you have these bad deals on your books for 5 more years of guaranteed money. And in a sport that has a salary cap, which compounds the problem of bad money, where you have a contract that's immovable and you have a limited amount of money that you can spend artificially, again, placed by the owners. This is an owner-made problem, okay? It's untenable to have somebody chewing up, say, 15, 20, 25% of your salary cap, and they're no longer any good. So they say, all right, the next negotiator, they say, we're cutting these deals down from 7-year maxes to 5-year maxes. The most you could do is 5. And as a matter of fact, if you switch teams, the most you can get is 4. So now what type of problem does that create, where you take us to the current paradigm where they're still bitching about players and player movement and all of that? Now, because a deal if I sign with a new team, can no longer be more than 4 years, 2 years into my deal, you can already see the horizon of the end of it. And so therefore, as a player, I look at it like, look, in 2 years, I'm not going to be here. You better do something with me. And those people that you want to try to send me to, I'm sending a message to them. I'm not going to be there. I got 2 years left on my deal. Don't worry. Give up assets for me. Give up young players, draft picks, all of that for me. In 2 years, I'm gone. And so because they can dictate those terms to both their current or teams that want to try to trade for them, or they can just tell everybody, like, look, I'm looking for a new home in 2 years. I'll be looking for a new home. And ownership just basically can't do anything to make them stay. There's nothing they could do about it. And that's why people call it the player empowerment movement, because players can now do whatever the hell they want as far as picking where they play. And then, the old sort of, carrot and the stick type of thing was just like the money. But like the TV deals have gotten so crazy where CJ McCollum, okay, who to my mind has never been to an all-star game, but is going to, I'm pretty sure he's going to clear $300 million in earnings, okay, in his career. $300 million in earnings for CJ McCollum. Mike Conley's going to do over 250. Like the list goes on and on and on and on of the type of money we're talking about, which is not to speak of the Dame Lillards, the Steph Currys, the LeBron Jameses, right? You can't really threaten these guys with much. They're going to play where they want because they've earned so much, and they can take the hits reputationally because they don't care about marketing dollars. They don't care about what their reputations are going to be after the game, where they need to get a job, or they still need to be pitchmen, or they still need to, rely upon their Q rating to keep their families fed. They're so fuck you rich, it's kind of hard to dictate terms to them now. And that's why people call it the player empowerment era.
And that's what's fascinating, because like one of my questions was, is this just for stars, right? Like LeBron was able to do this, but like, and CJ McCollum is like a star, but like you said, he's not like, I stop the presses like CJ McCollum's in town, right? Like he's just a good 3-point shooter.
That's very important for you to state. The people who wield the most power are the stars, and to be honest, rightfully so. As I said at the top of the show, these players disproportionately affect the outcomes of games. This is not like football, right? Where this one guy, basically the quarterback, who has a huge hand in the game, but like after that, like a left guard, like there's only but so much he could do, right? There's only but so much a free safety can do. There's only but so much a tight end can do. Whereas in basketball, man, if you are if you're a transcendent, if you're Gronkowski, look, you're gonna have great effects on the game, but you still gotta have Tom Brady getting you to rock. If you're playing with Gus Frerotte, that might not be the case for you, Gronk, as great as you are. If you're playing with Glenn Foley, as a Jets fan, I can tell you, it might not matter how transcendent you are. LeBron James in his prime, Kevin Durant in their prime, like these guys are context independent. They show up and they're going to change the outcomes of games no matter what. And so that's what makes it different. And they are the only, like if CJ McCollum bitches about his situation, one, nobody's going to care to try to get you. You don't change anybody's lives. So you can be ignored. Like we can ignore you, CJ. We can make you a pariah. We can bench you. It's not going to have that much of an adverse effect. Like we can ignore you. You can't ignore LeBron James. You can't ignore Kevin Durant. You can't ignore disgruntled James Harden. That guy is having a disproportionate effect on the outcomes of your business. Okay. And so, that's why they're wielding this power.
I mean, the thing is like, one, this has had a big effect, obviously, on people of the kind of mid-tier in the NBA, but like in the US at least, like I can't sit here and say that I don't feel like this has had knockoff effects even in other sports, like, college football, for example, like the transfer portal. Obviously, it's not the same dynamic as the NBA, but like that's player empowerment. And I think I will say as a fan, I think that there are issues with the transfer portal. Just the way that's set up right now, because it's like you can have your whole team just like disappear in the night. Maybe it's a shitty league run team and it's worth it. But you are seeing, like, as you were saying, like a lot of this is coming up in this like social justice era where like players, because they have the ability to say, I'm not going to deal with y'all in 2 years or 3 years, and I have the ability to just pack up and leave, they are more willing to speak up. And you see that in college football too, where like here at Texas, the University of Texas, like during Tom Herman's era here, you had players who were getting punished effectively because they were standing up, for Black Lives Matter, and the old Bubba guys who run the program were basically telling them to sit down and shut up, and they left. So like it has knockoff effects, like in like not just like in the sport, but also I think like generally too, of allowing people to have their own voice and not be so dominated by these programs or in the NBA teams that basically control your financial destiny.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we see these things is so transformational and groundbreaking. We have to understand first the history, man. Like people got to go back and look up the history of Kurt Flood and the reserve clause. They got to go back and look up the history of what Oscar Robertson and them fought for, as far as just getting a union in pro sports. Okay, like we're coming from a place of like, the norm, the accepted norm was these people get to hold your contract and tell you, you get to play here for as much as I feel like giving you for the rest of your life. Like nobody would ever see like Jamie Dimon leaving fucking JP Morgan for, I don't know, Goldman Sachs or BlackRock to be the CEO and being like, oh my God, he's so empowered. They would just be like, isn't that what they do?
The baseline is like very low. Yeah.
But we're coming from such a different place in sports, and admittedly, sports is a different type of business. The types of things that we're trafficking in, which is like nostalgia and tribalism and nationalism and all of those things that are tied to sports, makes it a different business proposition than, Tesla, of course, or Apple, right? But at the end of the day, these guys are workers, and not only they workers, man, they use their bodies.
Yeah.
Literally, their body is their instrument. It doesn't get more intimate than that, right? Like, they're not computer programmers. You know what I'm saying? Their bodies are literally their instrument. And so, yeah, I just think people see it as this radical thing because of where we've come from.
Yeah.
NCAA, where it's just like, we're calling these kids amateur, but we never call the coaches amateur.
No, for sure.
That's what killed. Like, I'm just like, yo, if these guys are amateurs, why are their coaches getting $50 million deals? On what planet is an amateur coach worth it? Like, we never. I always like saw that contradiction. Like, how? Okay, so they're amateurs. We can't pay them. Blah blah blah. Purity of sport. Why does Nick Saban need 60 mil?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about with athletes is the short careers too. So like you have to think about these giant dollar figures as things that they're going to have to sustain themselves for the rest of their lives. And
here's another thing. Yeah. But here's another thing, Matt. Your playing window does not change. Meaning, if you take a year off at 25, you don't get to bank it and be like, "Oh, I'll save it for when I'm 43. I'll use it then." When I'm 53, I'll use that year that I didn't play, that I didn't earn, and then it'll be fine. I'll just make it up. Then no. Your window is finite, and you have to do everything that you can to earn in that window, and then it's over.
I wanted to. There's a couple notes, things I wanted to point out because, like, I think we have a mix of audience, people who watch a lot of sports, and then some people who are just lefties who are watching this, and like I think it's really important to highlight that though. Like, this is player empowerment, this is workers empowerment, this is safety. Like, again, not to just only talk about football, but like somebody like Baker Mayfield, who I don't really like very much personally, but he was getting screwed over by his team because they weren't making any real investments into the offensive line. That's somebody who has to go out there and get sacked because his program is not investing in his like workplace safety, right? And like these like having the voice and the ability to stand up, like, yes, these guys make a lot more money than most people. Right. And they're in a very different tax bracket, but there is a relationship between the employer and the employee that any kind of socialist should be able to recognize. It's a good thing to see this kind of dynamic, especially when it has knockdown effects to everybody else in the program, everybody else in the sports, and even people in other sports.
Yeah, and I think what people need to understand too, because I think a lot of people do have a hard time understanding and it's nobody's fault. It's just, it's hard to equate the workers at John Deere who unionized this year, or I think at the end of last year, to, I don't know, Devin Booker, right? Like, it's hard to square that. However, just keep this in mind when you think about NBA players. There are 12 to 15 men on every single NBA team. There's 30 NBA teams. Just my quick napkin math, that's a maximum of 450 NBA players who are splitting. Now, it used to be 57%. Now it's down to 50% of the revenue split with the owners. Okay? They literally split it down the middle, 50-50. 450 guys have to split that 50%, whereas owners, sometimes they might have two other people in the group. Sometimes they have a group of 6, but let's just say it's 50 owners splitting that 50% and that's on the high end. I doubt this 50. No, it might be 50. There could be 50. I don't know. Because there's not a lot of people who's like James Dolan, who's the sole owner of the Knicks. But you get my drift. Let's just call it 50. Who gets to split that pie, 1. And 2, like, we know what the players bring to the table. They bring something wholly unique. They cannot be replaced. Whereas these owners, they just bring capital.
Yeah.
That they get recouped for and that they will guarantee to make money on. And again, the pie that they're splitting is basketball-related revenue. Remember that term. Because a place like, say, Madison Square Garden, when Jay-Z and Beyonce come through there, the Garden gets that money. That's not part of the basketball-related revenue. James Dolan still gets the coup on that. So all of those revenues he still gets to keep. And then when you're, say, Donald Sterling, and you bought into the NBA in the 80s for $30 million, you are disgraced, and your quote-unquote punishment is to sell your team to one of the richest men in the history of our country, Steve Ballmer, for a market-setting price of $2 billion, and which then raises the valuation of every single other franchise across the league. You don't have to split that profit with anybody. That's yours. And then the team itself, you get to pass down those revenues. You get to pass down the team to your son, your grandson. For generations, you get to keep making money off of that. Okay? Freaking, I don't know, Kyle Kuzma's kid is not going to be invested in the NBA for the rest of his life. Kuzma's going to earn whatever he can earn, and whatever he earns is what his kids are going to get to have. They're not shareholders in the NBA for the rest of their lives. So the guys who actually raise the value of the NBA as a product that allowed Donald Sterling's, 30-year, 25-year investment to go from 30 million to 2 billion to be his quote unquote punishment, they don't get a red cent of that. Okay, so just always understand that the balances are always tipped in favor of capital. Like, make no mistake, these dudes are the worker bees in that industry. They are. I get that their lives are glamorous. I get that they get to be A-list celebrities in the cases of people like LeBron and Carmelo Anthony and all of this stuff, and their lives are great. But make no mistake, it's this league generates money on their backs, and generations of Dolans, of Genie Busses, of whoever, very holy, unremarkable people get to profit off of that in perpetuity. So you tell me who's empowered here.
No. I mean, I want to echo that and just remind people that I mean, this is my position, but I think it's general amongst people who consider themselves to be Marxists in a real sense. It's we're not anti-wealth as much as we're anti-exploitation, right? The point of what we want to do is not necessarily to turn everyone into a pauper. It's rather to end the system of exploitation and to actually allow people to be able to benefit from the value that they're creating, right? So you should see these as beneficial. And look, when LeBron James acts as an owner of assets that he might own, right, and uses that power to affect other people negatively,
in his capacity as a boss, we critique him for that.
Yes, right, exactly. But in his capacity as a player, no, I don't want the fucking owner of the Lakers to be milking more money off of this once in a lifetime incredible athlete, right? And this is just kind of very, very basic stuff. And I think sometimes people misunderstand at least the socialist position as being necessarily anti-wealth, instead of what it really is about being anti-exploitation, a system that allows people to just continue to to get money off of rents or just whatever piece of paper says they own this or owns players or whatever the hell, right? Those are things that we're very, very much against. Not necessarily some people taking care of themselves and being able to enjoy a nice life for the work that they're doing.
I want to play this clip here. Something we have been talking about regular on this show is capitalists using deprivation and poverty as a cudgel to control their workforce. And that, I think part of the underlying thing we're looking at is that the problem the NBA has created when they don't have that, say, as they might have in the 70s or 80s against players. So I want to play this clip. This is from your stablemates at The Ringer. This is from Babani Jones was on with Logan Murdoch and Raja Bell. Here's a little bit of this clip.
Is maintain. you ain't gonna have to worry about it for too long. Because there's only so much of that shit they're gonna take before the next collective bargaining agreement comes up, and all of that is on the table again. So they do what you do now. Have fun, because they're gonna swing that balance of power back somehow.
They're gonna have to the max salary just didn't do what they thought it would do, right? Like the salaries got so high that it's kind of impossible to money whip them. These dudes are so rich that Ben Simmons said, you can keep $20 million. I ain't playing. And he's like 25. And he's like 25. He has already stacked up so much bread from playing basketball that he's like, no, y'all can have it. I don't need it. And that's what messed it up. When those dudes from Miami went to Miami and were like, oh yeah, we'll take a little bit less money. What's the big deal? It's $15 million. I already got X amount of money. Then the owners were like, damn, what are we supposed to do here? Because we still have it set up where you can pay them more. You just can't, the other guys can still pay a whole lot.
And I just find that so fascinating, honestly, like that concern and like, oh shit, like what do we actually do here? And I think, like you said, like the social justice stuff is a carry on. I think a little bit of that, like that it helps that like all these guys are getting paid more than like or a lot of these guys getting paid more than Michael Jordan was by his team. Obviously MJ had the endorsements, stuff like that.
But guess what? Even still, like, man, and the Jordan point is instructive in two ways. One, the last 2 years that he played for the Bulls, he made about $35 million each year, which would have been $70 million in 2 years, which was more than his career earnings combined before that, right? But because they enacted that artificial salary cap, thereby artificially depressing the wages of their workforce, we didn't get to a max contract to be $35 million until 15 years later? No, that's a lie. 20 years. That's max contracts reaching $35 million didn't happen until very, very recently. I want to say like 5 years ago, this took hold. Like, just think about that. 2017 was the first time a max deal reached $35 million, and Michael Jordan made that his last year in the NBA, his last year with the Chicago Bulls. He took a minimum deal to be on the Wizards because he was GMing that team. But like $35 million took him 20 years. And again, they colluded to artificially depress the wages of the workforce. And another thing that I think that people don't understand, that because they don't have a basic sense of economics, because you artificially deflate LeBron's salary, because he can't actually go out and eat up 80% of somebody's cap, the max he can get is 40 or 35%, right? Because there's no variance in the most that he can get, it doesn't make that no longer becomes even a consideration, right? Because I can't get my true value somewhere. Yeah, now I prioritize freedom of movement more so than the actual dollar amount, because guess what? It's artificial. It's been artificially deflated. So I have to go find value in this proposition somewhere else. And that value I find is who I get to work with every day, the city that I live in, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I'm now in Los Angeles. I can do my business ventures, my production company. I see value in my proximity to my other businesses, rather than, let's just say, the Memphis Grizzlies told him one day, like, we're going to give you 80% of our salary cap to come be the face of this team. We're going to fill out the rest of this roster with whatever, but we're going to pay you 80 fucking million, 90 million to come be on this team, because that's what your true and actual value is. You would see a lot less movement. So it's like the owners are just always, cutting off their own dicks despite the balls, and they're freaking bitching about it at every single turn.
Yeah.
Can you so like one of the kind of like barroom criticisms you get of people like LeBron and this shift is that, like, oh, we've moved away from a time of loyalty and having rootedness in your team and things like that, and we're just going to create a situation where in the NBA we're just going to have super team after super team. And like Giannis for a while was sort of brought up as like the antithesis of this, Giannis being loyal while other people are disloyal. Could you respond to that? And two, like as somebody who who watches a lot of the NBA, has it necessarily been true that since this era has come about, that like competition has sort of lessened across the board in the NBA and sort of concentrated in a few teams that are just the super teams that are like above and beyond better than any other team in the National Basketball Association?
I used to be somebody who had absolutely no time for that line of argument, but
Yeah.
as I get a little bit older and can view it through a different lens, perhaps not this from the same instincts as these hyper reactionary bunch of people that probably don't want to watch the fucking NBA in the first place anyway.
Yeah,
but it's a
that's
nice
true.
excuse as to why they don't. I think there's something to that, right? Because I remember having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I was like, there's actually more player movement in European soccer than in the NBA. And the passions of those people are even more inflamed. However, the roots of those clubs go so deep and so far back in time. It's not a one-to-one, right? Like these teams mean something different to those localities just by how long they've been there. And how those teams meant to define those localities is different from the Vancouver Grizzlies. You understand what I'm saying? Like it's different from the Toronto Raptors or the Phoenix Suns. Like people love that team, and people are, they have a decent amount of people who are loyal to it. But just the transience, the nature of cities like Phoenix or these other places, like it just makes it different for you to replicate that, that sort of loyalty, ingrain it in the team just by itself. And so when guys are moving all the time, I understand that a rootlessness can develop. Not every place is going to be as slavishly devoted as New Yorkers are to the Knicks. Everybody saw the bing bong after 2 in a row, those viral clips. 2-0, the Knicks, 82 games. They were 2-0. And people were losing their minds. That's an aberration. That sticks out in professional sports because, again, there is something transient about the players. And, I look at somebody like Ja Morant, who's absolutely engendered a sort of feverish loyalty in Memphis, and he's made himself into a demigod there. And I swear to God, man, he could be the Kobe of Memphis if he decides he wants to stay there forever. Like the way Los Angeles people are about Kobe and how insanely devoted they are to him, I can see Ja achieving that in Memphis, but he'd have to spend 17 years there. So I think there is something to that, but at the same time, I think the game should be able to sell itself. And maybe that's the basketball dork and purist in me who's just like, you should be enthralled by the excellence of these athletes, unrooted from tribalism and all this other shit, like the fucking cloth that they're wearing to play. You should be able to watch the genius and mastery and the poetry of movement that these guys are executing on a night-to-night basis and love it. And again, I get that might be pie in the sky and very purist and, Pollyanna of me, to see basketball as this powerful force that should drive you in. But I truly feel that way.
But I mean, the way the NBA is also becoming, I mean, obviously there's global leagues are growing, and there's a lot of exciting things that are coming out of that. But, the NBA is global now. In the same way where it's like, like for maybe like a first division English club, like you have 150 years of like, of history there. But for Manchester United fans, I mean, you have Manchester United fans in Jacksonville, Florida, who are just extremely passionate about that. And they expect like a super high level for their thing. And for the guys who like want to like, root for, if you're in England, like root for your team that's like right next to you instead of like the big city team where you're living in. They're just different scales. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Also, I mean, like soccer, I mean, obviously like it's a different history there in Europe. But like, those teams, like where did all the great players from South America go? They go to Europe and play. Like those guys didn't have deep roots in like Italy or anything like that either, right? And I don't know. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's like Pollyanna to sort of say that, like, you should want your sport to be able to reach its heights instead of just putting random caps on them, or something like that.
Yeah, like people ask me if I have a favorite NBA team. I'm like, not really. I generally root for excellence. That and my own picks because I'm vain and I want to look smart. But like generally what I root for is excellence. I want to watch something great happen, no matter who's doing it,
Yeah, excellence and health. Suns and Bucks, are those your picks for the finals?
Yeah, I just think Giannis is the best player in the league to me.
He's so good, man.
Just what just the menu of items that he offers to his team is so vast, man. What he's able to do on both ends as, a versatile defender, protect the paint, can guard wings, can even switch on to your point guard credibly, grabs every single rebound, is a grab and go guy in transition. As a pick and roll finisher, he's ridiculous. As a guy who can do some initiating himself on the perimeter off the bounce, he's killing you. You can't put a little guy on him on a switch. He'll just bury you underneath the basket. He's making his free throws again at a 70-something% clip. So don't even think about fouling the fucking guy. Like, and he plays with a level of energy and just motor. This guy plays hard. He's relentless every single game. I don't know how you don't admire that. And to me, he's just the best guy in the league right now. So I think they have enough. Brook Lopez has finally gotten back, so their defense is going to be able to, patch up a few leaks that they've been way below their standard on defense this season, but they haven't had Brook Lopez, and he's back. I just think when you got Giannis, man, and you got enough around him to do what needs to be done, give me Giannis in the East. Much as I love KD, much as I would love to see Miami do something. I'm sad about Boston losing Time Lord because what they were doing on defense, they were like world historic on defense from like basically December until that guy got injured. I just think Milwaukee's gonna do it. And out west, the Warriors are injured. Utah's a fucking mess. Their players hate each other. Memphis is too young. And I just think the Suns are beautifully positioned to take this thing. Unless
their controversy swallows them up, but
right. They have the players. They have they've proven it on the floor in the regular season. They're diverse. They're tenacious. They're dynamic. Like the way they can attack you on both offense and defense, they're not one-dimensional at all. They're four-dimensional on both ends of the floor. Like if you want to do a heavy switching, perimeter-oriented, they have three insanely good defensive wings in Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and Channing Crowder. That's the football player.
Jay Crowder. Like incredible perimeter defenders, wing defenders, big guys who can defend, bigger guys who can defend out in space. Chris Paul is a menace at the point of attack. Devin Booker has improved his defense. Ayton has shown rim protection abilities. So it's like they got rim protection. They can defend big wings. They got Chris Paul doing all the continuity stuff on offense. They can pick and roll you to death. You can't put a switch on DeAndre Ayton because he'll bury a small guy if you switch on him. Chris Paul can beat big guys on switches. Devin Booker absolutely torches big guys on switches. They can shoot it. Like there's nothing they can't do. They have no weaknesses on their team, and so I think they're going to go to the finals this year again. It's good vindication for both those teams because last year it felt like, and I was definitely one that thought that, like both these teams are here provisionally.
Come on, I mean, I was like, can you guys beat one healthy team this entire season? Between the two of them, they didn't beat a healthy team. They didn't play a healthy team until they played each other.
Yeah, I mean Durant would have beat them by a few centimeters.
Craziness.
Yeah. And I mean, I do want to echo the Giannis thing. Like his arc, they should make a Pixar movie out of him in the playoffs last year because like airballing the free throws and everyone making a joke out of him, and it doesn't
going like
phase
17
him.
for 18. It's
Doesn't
ridiculous.
phase him at all.
I love it.
And he just like returns. And I mean, compared to, my guy Ben Simmons, I'm holding out that he's going to be able to lock it down for
Bro, he
Nets
didn't
next
play
year.
all year, and then he has a bad back.
Hey, look, next year we'll hopefully, KD's still as good.
He gotta get a better gaming chair.
Hey, that's player empowerment. Woz, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course, guys. Anytime, I love you guys, man.
Where should people follow you? At Big Woz on a
At Big Woz on every single social media platform, BIGWOS. Of course, check out the Ringer NBA show feed. I do Weekends with Woz, which is my interview show where I basically just talk to my friends in NBA media every single Sunday that comes out. And then on Wednesdays, I do group chat with my man Justin Verrier and the young prodigy Rob Mahoney, where we just talk about the NBA. We try to give you guys analysis and, do what we do.
Don't forget Woke Bros either.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Don't forget Woke Bros every single Thursday with me and Nando Vila. Every single Thursday. Get Woke Bros wherever you get your podcasts.